India is the only large economy today that is projected to keep growing unimpeded without any chance of recession for the next 10-20 years. Now India has risen so far that Pakistan kind of becomes insignificant. Clearly, one single terrorist organization like Hamas would not have been able to do it. We see a significant transformation of the West, the wokeification of the West, or whatever you want to call it. Why are we wasting taxpayer money on humanities in the IITs? The US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. Each of these nations have their own homegrown terrorists of the Khalistani persuasion. Everything evil comes out of Hinduism. Caste is this evil concept that has come out of Hinduism. It's now ruining the West. Most diplomats are actually spies. The US doesn't want India to rise too much.
These kinds of allegations only skyrockets Modi's popularity in India. You're now incentivizing illegal immigration. You're now incentivizing conversions.
So first of all, when it comes to Jastinder, I would tell him, if you don't have any evidence, shut up.
I've had a lot of requests to have Abhijit on the show. I've been meaning to speak to Abhijit for a while. We've connected briefly in the past, and I'm glad that we're able to connect again today. Abhijit has been a very popular request, so I'm very happy to be able to welcome back to the show Abhijit Chavda. Abhijit, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's fantastic to reconnect with you and to be on the show again. So thank you. Lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like I was telling you offline that, often your videos will pop up on my home screen, and they're often very interesting topics. And they're often topics that I don't consider potentially a strong suit for me, which is, geopolitics. Like I follow it, but I don't know if I would consider myself much of an expert in the topic. And so I'm glad that I'm able to talk to you about these things, because it offers clarity for not just my audience, but it offers clarity for me personally as well, because I have an interest in a lot of these topics. And so why don't I hit you with the latest breaking news that has happened? It's a bit of a serious one too, because, news broke recently that the government of Qatar has sentenced 8 ex-Indian Navy officers to death for something. They say it's spycraft or espionage or something. They're not very clear, obviously, about what the charges are, how they've reached this decision and everything. But this comes at a time when India, is getting closer to Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia, like the UAE. The relations have been steadily improving. There's been the announcement of the, Middle Eastern corridor that is going to go through the UAE and Saudi Arabia. So it's a bit of a setback, and it comes at a time when you would think, and I think a lot of observers in India would think, that things are looking good. India's developing a positive relationship. So for a filthy casual like me, what would provoke such a reaction from Qatar?
Right. So let's understand the context in which this has happened. So since 2014, India has made great strides, like you said, in ameliorating relations with the Gulf countries, especially Saudi Arabia and the UAE as well. And I would say that India doesn't have good relations. India has excellent relations with Saudi Arabia and the UAE and various other Gulf nations as well. We have reasonably good relations with Iran as well. Now, this has happened with Qatar. So the 8 individuals who have been sentenced to death are Indian nationals, former Navy personnel, who apparently were working for a private company in the nation, in Qatar. And it looks like they have been accused of conducting espionage on behalf of a third country. Apparently, so in some quarters, it is being said that they have been accused of spying on behalf of Israel in Oman. The context is that there was some submarine contract that had been awarded or something like that, and they were apparently doing espionage about that particular matter. So that's a very brief context. Now, Qatar, as we know, is a very small nation. It's a tiny speck of a nation, and yet it is geopolitically significant for a number of reasons. First of all, they host a significant US presence over there, military presence on their soil. Secondly, they are one of the major exporters worldwide of LNG, liquefied natural gas. I believe about half of our LNG comes from this nation. Thirdly, they host a sizable Indian population, several lakhs. If I'm not mistaken, could be in excess of 5 lakhs possibly. Indians love to work in the Gulf.
I saw somewhere that they were nearly 20% of the population, the Indian diaspora.
Right.
I don't know if that's correct, but I did see that somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the figures are, but it's a significant, sizable population of Indians on their territory, obviously working as expatriates, not citizens. So these are the things. So, and Qatar, as we know, they have been involved in the negotiations between the US and the Taliban when it came to handing over power back to Taliban. As we know, the US spent 20 years handing over power in Afghanistan from the Taliban to the Taliban. So the Qataris were involved in those negotiations, the Doha thing, right?
Right.
They perform a variety of very important activities. They offer very important services to the US. They host US military personnel on their soil. So if you look at the big picture, they clearly are, you could say, a client state of the US. The term I like to use is vassal. They are US client state, a US vassal state. So everything they do has, you could say, a tacit, overt or covert US blessing. If you look at it from that perspective, it looks like the US may have blessed this particular thing. So these 8 sailors have been held in Qatar for over a year. That's what I hear. And now this week they have announced that death penalty for them. Now it's not clear whether the death penalty will be carried out. The Qataris don't really execute people randomly or very frequently, but it's an escalation between India and Qatar. So people are obviously in India, they're outraged that this tiny speck of a nation is staring us down and blah blah blah. We have to understand there's a whole bigger geopolitical big game behind this. When a tiny nation makes such big moves, it means that there is a much larger power behind them who are backing them up. And Qatar, as we know, they also have this, they have been rewarded for the services in the past. The 2022 World Cup was in Qatar, if I'm not mistaken. Was it Qatar or was it Oman?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It was Qatar, wasn't it?
It was Qatar.
Yeah, so they have, see, these awards, like the Olympics, like the World Cup and so on and so forth, these are rewards for services rendered. So they, and obviously, as we know, they have also participated in the Gulf Wars and all that on behalf of the US. So they have a long track record of providing services of various kinds, very important services to the US. So then with this all said, it looks like the US may be behind this, and the US may be using this as a tactic to pressure India in some ways. So why would the US want to pressurize India?
Right.
Well, the US has always played a double game with India. I mean, from their perspective, it makes sense. I mean, on the one hand, they need India as a counterbalance to China. The only nation in Asia that can counterbalance China is India. Russia, not so much these days because they are together these days. So it's India. So they need India against China from that perspective, but they also don't want to make the same mistake they made with China in the 1980s, 1990s. Because India is the only large economy today that is projected to keep growing unimpeded without any chance of recession for the next 10, 20 years. So you let that happen in 20 years, you have a new China on your hands. So they would not like to see this happen. Okay, they obviously would want to cut Mr. Modi down to size because he has been, putting out win after win. The G20 was a big win for India and so on. So kind of, cut him down to size, make him, degrade his image a little bit by making this look like a terrible loss for India. So there are a number of factors involved in this, and clearly the US doesn't want India to rise too much. They want India to be kind of where it is today, a $3, $4, $5 trillion economy, not more than that. Otherwise, it's alarm bells, long-term horizon. And they will employ a number of means to do this, to keep India off balance. Pakistan is obviously a great tool in their arsenal. Pakistan has been the old geopolitical tool since the 1940s to counterbalance India and to keep India off balance and keep bleeding India and all that. Now India has risen too far, so far that Pakistan kind of becomes insignificant economically, not yet militarily, but still economically it's kind of insignificant. So now they're leveraging their assets in the larger extended Indian neighborhood. Qatar is obviously one example, and they could use some others as well. And like you said, the IMEC happened. I mean, one of the major outcomes of the G20 summit in India was the IMEC, the India Middle East Trade and Transport and all that corridor. So that happened, and because of the situation in the Gulf region right now in the Middle East, IMEC is kind of not happening right now. Until the situation stabilizes and the state of war goes away, the IMEC is not going to happen. The Saudis actually wanted this to hit the ground running, and they wanted to start construction in 30 days after the summit. So it's kind of been a couple of setbacks for India, the IMEC not happening right now. It could still happen in the future if things go well again in the Middle East. But right now it's not happening, and now they have this Qatar situation. So it's kind of like a Kulbhushan Jadhav kind of situation, but on a slightly larger scale, because Kulbhushan Jadhav is one individual, and and these are 8 of our sailors.
Eight, yeah.
Yeah, see, this is something that happens as you grow. These are the growing pains. We have an enormous
Huh.
diaspora worldwide, and we cannot really ensure that everyone is safeguarded. The safety and security of all of them is taken care of. You're gonna
Yeah.
have these things. I am sure that we know that every nation does indulge in various activities, allegedly. Okay, I am not saying it is true or false, but you're gonna face this growing pains as India becomes more significant, more consequential. You're gonna face this kind of pushback, not just from Qatar but all across the world. So it is something that India, I think, should be get mentally prepared for, that we're gonna face more of these problems, and we also will have certain tools in our arsenal, in our toolkit, to counterbalance there. So the Chinese, for example, when their people are taken hostage, let's say like this, and imprisoned, what they do is that, see, if somebody if a Chinese executive is jailed in Canada on, let's say, what the Chinese call trumped up charges, well, they're going to take a couple of
Right.
Canadians and put them in jail in China. So eventually, we may also have to perhaps possibly use, get inspiration from what has been done in the past. I mean, in physics, if you have a new problem that is intractable, you look at the past. How have other problems been solved in the past? And similarly, the same goes
Right.
in geopolitics and statecraft and spycraft and whatnot. So that's the
Right.
situation right now. So right now, it's something that we are not quite in control of, but I am sure the government will explore a range of possible actions to safeguard the security and safety of our citizens in Qatar.
So let me ask you this, because when the G20 happened and the corridor was announced, I remember Biden making a speech and talking about how this was a real game changer.
Yeah.
This was a game changer. This is going to change how the world looks and change the Middle East, and they can't wait to get started. So on the one hand, they said they can't wait to get started. They seem to believe that this is a game changer. And then they might be potentially involved in Qatar's decision to, hand the death penalty to these Indian sailors, which might hold up the corridor as well. So if you see what I mean, like these two things seem to be incongruent with each other.
Yeah.
So why would the United States, on the one hand, call this a game changer, and on the other hand, try to throw a spanner in the works?
Right. See, our foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar, has said this on a number of occasions, that we're going to give issue-based support to the West, to the US. And he has also kind of alluded to the fact that the US, on the one hand, seeks to work in tandem with India when it comes to cooperation vis-a-vis China, the China matter, the Indo-Pacific, the Quad, all that stuff. But on the other hand, the US does its best to impede India's, progress, and to kind of hurt India's interests in a variety of other ways. So it's a kind of a two-pronged strategy. So when it comes to the death penalty to these 8 sailors, it's not the factor that's going to stop the IMEC, the India Middle East Europe trade corridor. It's the situation right now in Israel that is kind of thrown a spanner in the works right now. But the point is this, that the US doesn't want India to rise too much, and it's going to do its bit to prevent India and to slow down India's rise in a variety of ways, especially economic rise and to some extent military rise. But it wants India to be on its side when it comes to the China factor. So that is the kind of complicated game that is being played. Yeah, definitely the US looks like it looks like it's behind the Qatar entire incident, right? The US have a long track record of supporting Qatar, of using Qatar services, so that's the case. The IMEC is very interesting because, like you said, President Biden said it's a kind of a game changer. It still could emerge as a significant competitor to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, the OBOR, One Belt One Road, and the Maritime Silk Road, all that.
And you would think that the Western countries would be fairly dedicated to finding an alternative to the OBOR, right?
Oh, definitely, yes. And this was supposed to be that, but something else entirely has happened, the Hamas attack on Israel. And that is what has kind of stopped any progress on that front, the IMEC front right now. IMEC is actually a very interesting kind of project. It kind of bypasses Suez, also bypasses Turkey, which has really riled up the Turkish the president, Mr. Erdogan, because he says that anything that happens in this region has to pass through Turkey. We are saying, why should it? So it's bypassing Turkey and going straight to Greece. They're arch rivals. So it's kind of riled them up very badly. It involves Israel, it involves Jordan, it involves Saudi Arabia, the UAE. So it's actually something that can really integrate the region with India as one endpoint and Europe as the other endpoint. And India could eventually, in the long run, do something on the other end of the scale as well. Southeast Asia trade corridor also could be created, which would not be very difficult to do. So India could be the node, the hub of these two big trade corridors going in one going east and one going west. It could happen if we get things right, but right now, as things stand, because of the Hamas-Israel situation, which could actually expand further, because of that, it's not happening right now. But I don't think that is what the US intended. The US actually had given its blessing to the IMEC, even though the US is not a major power. I mean,
Right.
it's not a Eurasian power, the US. Technically, it's not. Actually, it is the major power everywhere. So they had kind of blessed it, and they wanted it to go forward. It may go forward still in the
Yeah.
future if this Middle East situation kind of stabilizes.
Yeah, I still would imagine that it would go forward because, I do think every single party involved has a lot to gain. So, and, especially when it comes to the United States, the EU, Saudi, these are all major players.
Oh, yes.
And if all these major players have something major to gain, then I would think that, whenever it is that the Israel situation calms down, that they would want to move ahead with it again.
Absolutely, it gives them more options. It gives them major options. It connects the biggest new growing market, India, with the old market, Europe, which desperately needs connections which are not China dependent. So it gives them more options. It kind of bypasses Turkey because I'm sure NATO and the West are fed up of Turkey. Turkey has been leveraging its prime position on the geography for decades. They have been rent seeking their stewardship of the straits, the Turkish straits, for decades now, and it's kind of a headache for the whole world. So yeah, we would like to bypass that and create something new, and that is a win-win for all, like you said, all the parties. So I'm sure it will go ahead in the future when the situation stabilizes in the Middle East.
So let's pivot to another part of that same region, and with the Hamas terror attack that happened in Israel, we'll get into it in a second as well. But since we were talking about how the corridor was announced and then this attack happened and the corridor sort of got put on ice for a little bit. So if we were to put on our tinfoil hats a little bit and imagine, because the attack that happened was so large in scale, and it happened from air, from land, from sea, and it was able to breach the Israeli defenses so comprehensively, which a lot of at least casual observers might, like myself, I thought that was impossible. Like, how you have the Iron Dome, you have that wall, you have such a militarized border. How are 1,000 bloody terrorists able to get through? You would think, at least I would think, that this isn't something that Hamas would be capable of by themselves, right? So if I were to ask you to put your tinfoil hat on for a second, would you also agree that this is not something that Hamas would be able to pull off by itself and by the resources just that it has in Gaza?
That's a very interesting question. Excellent question. If you look at the Gaza Strip, it's the Israel-Gaza border. It's roughly 50 kilometers, and it's possibly the most closely guarded and surveilled border on the planet. They have all this barbed wire. They have motion sensors. They have cameras everywhere. They have HUMINT. They have SIGINT. They have Shin Bet. They have They have Mossad. They have intelligence on the ground within Gaza itself. They have informants everywhere. They have aerial surveillance. They have everything that you can imagine. And Israel is probably one of the most high-tech surveillance nations in the world, right? So from that perspective, knowing all that, the whole world knows this, and considering these facts, it simply doesn't compute that Hamas, which is supposedly there's a ragtag terrorist organization, would be able to just walk into Israel more or less by cutting the wires and just walking in, 100 terrorists, and sending those paragliders or whatever, those motorized paragliders, and just get into Israel like that. I mean, were the Israelis blind for a few hours? What happened, right? And this happens exactly on the 50th anniversary of the 1973 disaster, the Yom Kippur War, which is considered to be the greatest intelligence failure in Israeli history. Well, now that this has happened, I think this would be the greatest intelligence failure in Israeli history. So what happened? It simply doesn't compute from my perspective. And some would say that maybe the Israelis were looking for a casus belli, a justifiable cause for war, and they let this happen. If that is the case, I'm not saying it is, but if that is the case, then the Israelis were okay with a few hundred of the citizens, 1,000 plus of the citizens getting slaughtered by the Hamas terrorists. So We don't know what actually happened. Maybe in 50 years' time, like today, we have histories of the Yom Kippur War, in which it's clear that it's an intelligence failure. Maybe in 50 years' time, historians will be able to write about what really happened. Right now, we don't know what happened. But
Right.
what happened is that there was this large-scale slaughter in Israel. Lots of people were killed. Lots of Israeli civilians were taken hostage into Gaza. And then the Israelis, as we know, they proceeded. They went ahead and they have been bombing Gaza. How did the Israelis not know that Hamas had stockpiled thousands of these rockets? These short range missiles. I mean, the
Right.
Israelis have assets on the ground in Gaza. They have assets on the bank on the ground in the West Bank also, the West Bank of the River Jordan.
Yeah.
If you look at the geography of Israel, it's a very peculiar geography. At some points, it's like 10, 15 kilometers wide at most, and so on. And it's kind of hemmed in between enemies. And Israel has always operated under a state of siege, under a state of extreme paranoia that tomorrow could be the last day. So they always are on their toes with their surveillance. And also, how did this happen? So it's clear
Right.
that the planning that went into this operation, this large-scale invasion of Israel and everything that ensued, the stockpiling of
Right.
thousands of rockets and all that. Clearly, one single terrorist organization like Hamas would not have been able to do it. Obviously, they had external help. Now, how far does the external help extend is the
Yeah.
question. I mean, the usual suspects are Iran, because Iran have been involved in the past with Hamas. They have also been involved with Hezbollah. If you look at the northern frontier of Israel, you have Lebanon.
Yeah.
So and that's where Hezbollah operates. So Hezbollah also has Iranian links. But now we know that Iran itself is no longer isolated. Iran have been supplying Russia with the Shahed 2 drones and loitering munitions and whatnot, arms and ammunition. They have huge stockpiles of that. They have not been at war for decades, since the 80s at least. Overtly at war. So they have good stockpiles of arms
Yeah.
and ammunition. Israel, on the other hand, they have been sending their precious ammunition to Ukraine, and so has the West. So right now, Israel may actually possibly be low on ammunition. And in that case, what do they do
Yeah.
if they are hemmed into this very real prospect of a two and a half front war? On the one hand, you have Hamas. On the other hand, you have Hezbollah. And obviously, they are surrounded by enemies, even in the Mediterranean. If you go to the west, you have Turkey, which doesn't really
Hmm.
have a great affinity for Israel. So it's a tough situation for Israel to be in. So it looks like Iran may possibly be involved, but Iran is, if you look at geopolitics today, Iran is not alone. It is part of the new RIC. The old RIC was the RIC within BRICS: Russia, India, China. But today, India is not so much part of that. It's Russia, Iran, China. Because Iran has been supplying Russia with arms and ammunition, with drones and whatnot. The Chinese have a long-term strategic partnership, 25-year strategic partnership with Iran, in which they are investing billions and billions of dollars into Iran. So it looks like this could be one of the new fronts of the new Cold War, the Russia-Iran-China front, and maybe they are all in this together in targeting Israel. We know that Russia has single-handedly, you could say, propped up Assad, who would have been wiped out by the Americans. The Americans have been saying he's a bad guy, and they even use Al Qaeda and whatnot against Assad. Whenever it suits
Yep.
them, they will use Al Qaeda. Yeah, and it's the Russians who kind of saved Assad's backside, by giving him what he needed to stay in power. So Russia is involved in Syria. Russia is involved in this entire region. So this is something that extends way beyond the superficial actors that we are seeing superficially, which is Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. There could be Iran behind it. There could be Russia involved. There could be even some kind of Chinese involvement in all this. As Israel, takes action against Gaza, they want to wipe out Hamas, obviously, but Hamas is hiding behind civilians, as we know. That's what they typically do. They have a huge network of tunnels that Israel needs to neutralize, but all these tunnels pass through civilian areas. So if you want to target them, you're going to target civilians. As civilians die, there's going to be this temptation among the Islamic nations to do something about this. Because, see, the Islamic world is divided. We know it's a very divided world. You have the Shia, the Sunnis, the various factions, the Houthis, the Saudis, the Iranians, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to Palestine, they kind of band together. Okay, so
Yeah.
if things cross a certain limit, the Islamic world might be tempted to intervene. And when it comes to intervention, it's going to be about who goes in first and shows that they are the leaders of the Islamic world. So within that also, we have three major poles. We have Iran, who seeks to be the great leader of the Islamic world. We have Saudi Arabia, they are the traditional leaders of the Islamic world, and you have Turkey, who wants to be who wants to recreate the Ottoman Empire, and
Oh no, I thought you were going to say Pakistan.
Pakistan doesn't. I mean,
No,
Pakistan.
no leadership position for them.
So you have Turkey, you have Iran, you have Saudi Arabia, and you also have Egypt. Egypt also is a traditional strong force in this region, and they have a border with
Right.
Israel in the Sinai region. So if one of these guys enters the fray, everybody else enters the fray. And then it's going to be an
Hmm.
existential crisis for Israel. Then what does Israel do? They will ask the US for succor. Please come in and help us out. We are about to be overrun. Now, how much can the Americans do to save Israel? They have bases in the
Yeah.
region, but it's not that easy to safeguard those bases if there is a hot kinetic firing action going on.
Right.
The Iranians could very well take out some of the American bases. And the Iranians, as we know, they have been trying to go nuclear, and they may be very close to being nuclear, or they may already have sufficient fissile material for a nuke or two, at least for a dirty bomb, which is not a nuclear device, but a conventional device laced with fissile material or radioactive material. So this could very quickly get very complicated and go beyond just the confines of Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah. It could rapidly go beyond that if it goes.
Yeah, and if you're talking about like an existential crisis for Israel, then
They have,
it is a nuclear state, and so there's the danger of that.
yeah, so we don't even want to think about this, but it could very
Yeah.
rapidly escalate in that direction if the major powers are not careful. That's what I'm saying.
It is tricky because we've seen how the Hamas uses civilians, hides behind civilians, hides their weapons and their rockets, etc., in hospitals and schools and things like that. Well, it's funny because what has been surprising, I think, for a lot of Westerners and a lot of sort of liberal Jews in Western countries has been how liberal universities in Western countries have sort of lock, stock, and barrel supported Hamas and have banded against Israel. Even the potential for the Israeli state to exist, the potential for the Israeli state to defend itself, and things like that. And it has been interesting watching a lot of Western observers be very surprised at how could our vaunted universities, side with the terrorists like that. It's not very surprising, I think, for a lot of Indians who may be, a bit more used to this, and at least, people like us who've been covering this for a while, it might not be very surprising. It was surprising, I imagine, to some people in India as well, that how could 31 organizations in Harvard side with Hamas and blame Israel for the terror attacks and things like that. I think it goes to show you, and I think it goes to show those Western countries sort of the level of danger that they're facing from within. And a lot of these universities have tie-ups with prestigious Indian universities,
Yes.
are very heavily influenced by a lot of these universities that were supporting Hamas. In fact, there are many government agencies that partner with these American universities, Western universities. There are Indian billionaires that donate large sums of money to these American universities that have, again, I want to reiterate, lock, stock, and barrel blamed Israel for the terror attack that happened upon them. And I feel like this is a danger that the Western countries are realizing now. And I wonder if the Indian establishment or the Indian population in general will wake up to the level of intellectual support that is provided to anti-India element or anti-Western element or anti-Israeli elements from within the educational centers of their countries.
Absolutely. We see a significant transformation of the West, the wokeification of the West, or whatever you want to call it. This process began in the 1950s and 1960s. It was these leftists that slowly infiltrated the system. And they started coming into positions of power, becoming tenured professors, becoming part of the bureaucracy, the governance mechanisms and all that. They became influential speakers, they became influential professors, they wrote textbooks. This is a gradual process that happened from the 1960s mainly onwards. The counterculture movement, the anti-Vietnam War protests, all of this were led by the West, and they were led from universities and from university campuses. And then you had the French, the French intellectuals, what do you call them? The postmodernism, right? Derrida
Right. Yes.
and Foucault and all these people. And these people have an enormous amount of influence in the American universities. And today, if you look at the situation, it's like it's the norm. Okay, the entire humanities and all these departments are infested by these lefties. And what they have done is that because of their influence or in the academic system, also in the media, and so all that. Because of that, there is, you don't see any patriotism among the youngsters in the US. No one loves their country
Yeah.
anymore, and they kind of they're self-loathing people and all that. And the other thing we have seen is that they kind of hijacked the feminist movement. First of all, the lefties, they co-opted the feminist movement, and secondly, they made this alliance with the Islamist movement as well. Okay, and this is something that happened gradually from the 1960s all the way into the 2020s. It's a small.
It's so
slow
curious,
gradual
isn't it?
process. Yeah.
Isn't that very so curious, Abhijit? Because I feel like, sorry to cut across you there, but I just feel like it's so curious that they've aligned so deeply with the Islamists. Because whatever they blame the Christian patriarchy of doing, I think what the Islamist patriarchy is doing it probably about 15, 20 times worse.
Yeah, but there's this taboo against saying anything against them. No criticism of this particular ideology and this particular political line is accepted. You may not criticize them at all. It's like he who shall not be named, right? That sort of thing. You simply
Yeah.
cannot criticize that. And because of
It's like atheist blasphemy.
yeah, it's
Basically.
like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You simply may not criticize that, and because you can't criticize it, that's why it is like it is just wholeheartedly swallowed, and everything that they put forward is taken as self-evident. So because of this, what we are seeing is that the US academic system, the media also have totally aligned themselves with these forces, especially the Islamist forces, the political Islam, that sort of thing. We have all these politicians in the US. What's her name? Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, and there are a whole other bunch of politicians. There's this Pakistani caucus in the US, as you may be aware. It is a very strong anti-India plank that they always espouse. It's kind of part of the Democratic Party, the Democratic movement as well. And lots of politicians, if they want to be, I mean, all the Indian politicians, whoever exists in the US, they typically most of them tend to be Democrats, and they kind of align themselves with this. So what we see, like coming back to the main thing, is that the academic system is very strongly anti-India, anti-Hindu. In the 60s, 70s, etc., many of the leaders, the flag bearers of this movement were Jews, okay, Jewish professors. And we have the
Yeah.
so-called liberal Jews who are kind of pro-Palestine and all that. There is also a faction of these people in Israel itself. Until that concert was taken down by the flying terrorists, they were all pro-Palestine and LGBTQ and whatnot. I mean, LGBTQ is a whole different story, but they were all pro-Palestine. Now suddenly the Israelis find themselves in this existential dilemma. What are we going to do? Are we going to survive the next 2 years? And what we are seeing is that we see this outpouring of anti-Semitism in the US and in the West. The Canadians honor Nazis. In Germany, we have open anti-Semitic, sloganeering and whatnot. In the US, we are seeing more and more anti-Semitism, which is coming out in the open. So the world is once again.
And it's from a lot of it is from the left. You would imagine that 99% should come from the right, but I would say a majority at this moment is from the left.
And that's why these so-called Jewish academics and intellectuals are so hurt. They're expressing their great hurt. There are many of them I know on Twitter, and they're saying that we never imagined a day would come when we would be hounded the way that we were in the 1930s, and that's exactly what's happening. And the irony is that many of the flag bearers of this movement were Jewish professors themselves, Jewish academics. So it's kind of the chickens have come home to roost. That's what's happening. And for us, the Indians, the Hindus, it's no surprise that the left of the US is allied very strongly with the anti-Hindu and the Islamist movement and all that. But for the Jews, it looks like they didn't realize this until all this happened right now. So it's kind of a wake-up call for them. So yeah, that's the situation that we are seeing in the US right now.
It is quite alarming, and it's especially alarming because I feel like the connections and the sort of give and take between these universities and Indian universities have been established for quite a long time.
Yeah.
If you just take an example of like Ashoka University, which was sort of developed as the Harvard of India, right? Okay, we're going to have all these businessmen and these entrepreneurs. We're going to spend 1,000 crore rupees, right? And we're going to build this beautiful campus, and this is going to be the absolute top tier university in the country. But if you look at some of the research that is produced from Ashoka University, that should give a lot of Indians some cause for alarm.
Oh, absolutely. And you see this throughout the Indian academic system as well. The same lefties that you have in the US, the same thing is replicated in India. If you look at the kind of research that is being done, first of all, let me give you the example of the IITs. Okay, the IITs are the Indian Institutes of Technology. So why in a Institute of Technology do you need humanities departments? First of all, why are we wasting taxpayer money on humanities in the IITs? That's the first question. I don't know why it's happening. It's there.
Yeah.
There are humanities departments, I think, in all IITs, if I'm not mistaken, at least the major ones.
Right.
And if you look at the kind of people they've hired, and they are on the or other professors, and the kind of research they produce, it's all anti-India, it's all anti-Hindu stuff. It's very Hindu phobic. That's the total constant refrain and narrative. So you see the same thing in India as well. That's the kind of setup that's been replicated in India. So like you said, Ashoka University, the kind of people they have hired, the kind of research they are doing, the kind of things that they are espousing, and the kind of narratives they are pushing out, very Hindu phobic, very anti-India, kind of strengthens the hands of your enemies academically through, and gives them logical justifications for being anti-India, by putting out such research papers and textbooks and whatnot. This has been happening since the 1970s. Like I've spoken about in the past, the Aryan invasion theory is one of the major bulwarks of the anti-India force, which is used to justify all kinds of anti-Hindu activities, right? The Hindus are the descendants of the white Aryans, who are invaders, rapacious, barbarians, misogynistic, casteist, patriarchal, blah, blah, blah. And that's why Hinduism is an evil force that needs to be dismantled.
Yeah, look how Ukrainian I look. Yeah, look how Ukrainian I am.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture.
I simply don't understand why. I mean, when we're going to change this? I'm sure there are small changes, small steps that have been taken in that direction. But yes, there are lots of, like you said, Indian billionaires and entrepreneurs and very respected people who give money to Harvard and whatnot, to the American universities. I mean, first of all, why don't you invest that money in Indian universities and good universities? And say, and the kind of research that's been funded by Indian billionaires in the US, it's anti-India research. I mean, it furthers those anti-Hindu narratives and all that. And recently, I heard
especially Harvard. I feel like especially Harvard, because a lot of these billionaires, they want to get that rub. Oh, we have a building named after us in Harvard University. But that same building is publishing research that said that Hinduism is responsible for American racism. There's a new concept that says that the Hindu caste system is responsible for racism in America, anti-black racism in America. Which tarah ka chutiapa agar if you want to spread, then go ahead.
Yeah, so you know what, in the humanities, when you publish a research paper, it's not like physics or mathematics where it has to be logically consistent. You can make any claim and then publish it and cite 15 different people who have said similar nonsense in the past. And as long as the reviewers are on your side, you can get any goddamn nonsense published in the humanities. That's how it goes. So yeah, I've heard that the term caste has become prevalent in the US. They're going against alleged caste discrimination by Indian Americans and whatnot. Some African American lady came up with a book called Caste, and Oprah Winfrey has been pushing that book. So they're kind of normalizing that anti-Hindu viewpoint, that everything evil comes out of Hinduism. Caste is this evil concept that has come out of Hinduism, and it's now ruining the West and whatnot. So yeah. That's just how it is, and there's nothing we can do about what happens in the US, but at least we can clean up our system back here in India. And not sure when it's going to happen, but what we see is that we still get a lot of funding for anti-India, anti-Hindu activities within India itself, and we have these departments in the IITs and God knows where else, which have only one agenda: to push out this nonsense. So yeah, that's where we are today.
Yeah, I also want to quickly talk about Jastinder Singh Turdon. Because in many ways, it's been a very entertaining development in India-Canada relations, because I don't remember, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember the Indian government ever taking such a firm stand against a Western country before. I don't remember it, at least. If you do, please tell me. But the way the Indian establishment has sort of united against Canada, the kind of tough stance that Jaishankar, Modi, everybody has taken against Canada, it was a little bit surprising to me, because, Modi is a very pro-Western prime minister, right? And he's always taken great pains to develop a good relationship with Western countries. But were you surprised at all with the way India reacted to Canada and their allegations?
To some extent, yes, but more than surprised, I was very happy to see this. You're right. I have never seen in the past in Indian government ever take even 1/10 of the stance that we have taken when it comes to Canada. And obviously, your foreign policy is an extension of your internal policies, and the robustness of your foreign policy depends on the robustness of your economy and your geopolitical standing. So, since 2014, India has totally taken a U-turn when it comes to all of this, and India is now seen throughout the world as one of the major geopolitical powers. India has a genuine standing. India is growing, so India can afford to take certain actions today, which we could not take a decade ago. Now, when it comes to and why has India taken these actions? Because India is totally justified in taking these actions. See, the Canadians are trying to say that these are Indian problems that have been imported into Canada, and they are kind of fouling up the domestic political landscape. But yeah, the truth is that these are Canadian problems. These are your citizens. And your citizens are indulging in terrorism. This is Canadian homegrown terrorism that is kind of being used to target India. And it is something that you will see across the Five Eyes nations, the Anglosphere, the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. Each of these nations have their own homegrown terrorists of the Khalistani persuasion, which is a very minor, which is a completely marginal movement in India, if it even exists at all. They are nurturing these anti-India elements on their soil. We have seen this happen in the UK in the past. You know, the Indian High Commission and Indian diplomatic properties have been targeted repeatedly in the UK. This has happened in Canada as well. Indian temples, Hindu temples, have been targeted and desecrated on multiple occasions in Canada, in the UK. It may or may not have also happened in Australia, perhaps, and there is a significant such thing which also exists in New Zealand. And let's not forget the US. That Pannu fellow, the Pannu, whatever his name is, he is a dual US Canadian citizen, and I think Mr. Doval once said recently to his American counterparts that the only reason why you guys aren't taking action against Pannu is because he's your CIA agent. So this was leaked to the press. This is what Mr. Doval said. So it's clearly something that extends beyond Canada. But Canada in the last couple of months has emerged as the biggest symptom of this, right? And Mr. Trudeau, Justinder, went ahead and made these allegations without any evidence. That we have credible allegations of God knows what. Arey, produce the evidence here. Produce one piece of evidence.
Right. And since then, they've just been saying allegations. Nobody has said, here's the evidence, ye dekh lo.
Give us one piece of evidence. Ek to dikhao yaar. So there's nothing, right? They have nothing to stand on, but they made these statements, and just because we are white-skinned and we are Anglos, that's why you have to take us at our word. But aise nahi chalta hai. It's not going to work anymore in that manner. So that's what happened, and then India said that we need parity in the the diplomatic staff. According to the Vienna Convention, a nation has the right to enforce parity among the two diplomatic missions. So the Canadians had all these extra staff, and I don't know what they were doing in India. The government of India in recent times, in the past couple of weeks, has said that they were interfering in the internal affairs of India. So it looks like the Canadians had a bunch of CIA agents and spies on India, in their consulate in India, masquerading as diplomats, but they were actually undercover spies. So now India has ensured that these people have to pack up and leave, 41 people. And after that, Justin Trudeau and the Five Eyes nations have been complaining about this, that we take this seriously and this is concerning, and this violates whatever Vienna agreement. Konsa bhai? Show us the clause and whatever.
What is the reasoning for it? Why does it violate Vienna Convention?
Violates nothing. It violates absolutely nothing. It actually is, it upholds the spirit of the Vienna Convention or agreement or whatever that is, that the two nations need to have parity in the amount of diplomatic staff they have. And we could eventually do that to the US also. Why you have so much staff? Okay, I'll tell you what. How long does it take to get a visa for an Indian to the US? Takes months and months and months. What is the number of diplomatic staff they have in India? Maybe the largest contingent of all. So if you have so many diplomats in India, what exactly are they doing, my dear American friends? That even though you have hundreds of diplomats on Indian territory, it takes months for us to get a visa. Ho kya raha hai bhai? What are you guys up to? What are they really doing? Eventually, we're going to ask this question to the Americans as well. So the truth is that most diplomats are spies. In Israel, there is a very clear policy. If an Israeli soldier accepts a lift from a car that has diplomatic plates, that person is straight away thrown into jail, because Israel considers all diplomats to be spies and hostile agents.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we also have to remember that most diplomats are actually spies. Okay, so it's a very small number of diplomats who actually do what we call diplomacy. You know, all that diplomatic stuff. Most of them are intelligence agents. They are there here to collect intelligence from a variety of ways. They interface with the Indian business community. They interface with the defense community. They have military attaches. They have people who actually do like hardcore spying. You have SIGINT people. You have HUMINT people. You have infiltration experts. You have exfiltration experts. The Americans have all this stuff on Indian soil. So it looks like the Canadians were hosting a large contingent of these spies, and we have made sure that they have to go back. And now even a little nation like New Zealand is complaining that we take this seriously and we are concerned. Arey, tum ho kar yaar. So that's a deal.
Yeah, that's funny. It's like Nepal complaining to America about some foreign policy issue. Like, nobody cares, man. Why are you talking? That's just embarrassing for you.
Yeah.
What are you doing? In the past few months, maybe couple of years, there's been reports, widely reported of people on India's most wanted list slowly dropping off like flies. Now, a lot of people have come out and said, obviously, Jastinder Singh has said that it's India that's done it. We know we have credible allegations. A lot of, obviously, what Jastinder doesn't realize, which is funny, that these kinds of allegations only skyrockets Modi's popularity in India. कि मोदी ने घर में घुस के बोला था कि मारेंगे और घर में घुस के मार दिया.
घर में घुस के मारेंगे.
So it only makes Modi more popular. But besides that fact also, a lot of Indians are also like, अरे रॉ ने देखो क्या कर दिया है. If you had to take a sort of an educated guess on the matter, do you really think that it is raw agents that are going country to country and finishing these people off? Or do you think the answer is a little bit more complicated than that?
I think all answers in the real world are a little more complicated than raw agents going and doing some heroic stuff behind the scenes. First of all, there is something called outsourcing. You can outsource a hit. Okay, you can outsource a hit to a local freelancer. So we know that lots of these anti-India individuals are kind of dropping dead on a regular, frequent basis. That's happening, many of them in Pakistan, some of them in other parts of the world as well. There may or may not be a pattern there. I am sure that some of it is possibly, perhaps, something to do with us. Okay, our government, possibly, perhaps. Okay, there is no evidence whatsoever. So first of all, when it comes to Jastinder, I would tell him, if you don't have any evidence, shut up. Okay, because you have to produce evidence of this. It also could be gang warfare, and you can even induce gang warfare, and you can get that also done. So it's clear that Mr. Doval has not been sitting idle with the past 8, 9, 10 years. It's been almost 10 years since he has been in that position. Clearly, he has not been sitting idle. And when you have a nation like India that is growing rapidly, which is more and more geopolitically significant, you have to build certain capabilities, covert capabilities, capabilities to gather influence, to gather intelligence in other nations, to, let's say, do espionage. Every large nation has to do this, and India is no exception. Yeah. So I am pretty sure that India has certain capabilities, and India may have exercised certain capabilities, but clearly there is no evidence of a single one of those individuals being linked to something that originated in India. So if India hypothetically may be behind this, then India is doing a great job of staying invisible. So I think it's more complicated. I don't think it's raw agents going out like James Bond and killing people. I think there are a number of ways to achieve a certain objective, and you can obviously, I'm just speculating, but you can hire freelancers, local freelancers, and get things done if you need to.
Right. And finally, before I want to do another quick section with you, but before that, I just want to ask, have you been following what's happening with this entire caste census thing, right? This has been a big policy plank that has come up from the opposition, that there needs to be a caste census done in India, and the result of the caste census needs to be jitni abadi utna haq. Fundamentally, I don't have a problem with the caste census, because you can actually use the caste census for better delivery of welfare programs, right? Better targeted delivery of welfare programs. Chahe Jan Dhan Yojana ho ya whatever ho. You can use it for that. So for that, it does make sense. What I have a problem is with the second section, which is jitni abadi utna haq. So you will only get benefits and rights depending upon your population, which means that if you're a Parsi, forget about it. Which means that if you're a Sikh, forget about it, right? I don't know if you followed it much, but I find that because the opposition's really doubled down on it, that this is going to be our plank going into 2024. Rahul Gandhi's been talking about it non-stop for the past 2 months. Caste census, caste census, caste census. I wonder if you've heard about it, and I wonder if you have any opinions on the matter.
I have heard about it. I have not really followed this, but what do I think about this?
Okay.
I think caste is something that we should have left behind in 1947. I think that all Indians should get the exact same rights, no matter what gender you are, no matter what region you're from, or no matter what so-called caste you're from. Everybody is supposed to be equal under the law, under the constitution. And if we are not able to do that, then what the hell are we doing? So we have to clearly mismanage things by doing this entire reservations business. I think reservations should be on the basis of your financial status, not on your birth. You know what so-called caste you're part of. And if people say that jitni abadi utna haq, that is so wrong. I think it simply cannot be that way. On the one hand, they accuse the BJP and Hindus of being majoritarian. On the other hand, they want a different kind of majoritarianism, which kind of further
Yeah.
fragments and splinters India down caste lines. Okay. So I am totally
Right.
opposed to this. I am totally opposed to this entire thing of caste. Why should a single government document mention your caste? Make everybody equal. That's what I would say. I am against mentioning caste or religion at all. Just make everyone equal and let everyone come up on the basis of their merit and their talents and their hard work, their parishram, like we say. That's the long and the short of it from my perspective. I've not really followed what's happening, the politics behind it. Like you said, certain politicians want this to happen. Well, I am totally against that. That's nonsense. We need to move
Yeah.
way beyond this caste nonsense and go forward as a nation. You know?
Yeah, for me personally, I think the government's focus should be. I'm not personally against reservations for a limited amount of time.
A limited amount of
I
time
don't
makes
think
sense, yes.
reservations should continue in perpetuity
Yeah.
like they have. I think the government's focus should be on growing the economy of the country, getting the people of India to a certain economic level where the government can legitimately say, look, everybody is at a certain economic level now. We don't need caste reservations anymore. Now I think we are in a position where people are able to compete on merit, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about how we can end reservations now. I feel like till that time, I don't have a fundamental issue with reservations. But what I have an issue with majorly is jitni abadi utna haq, because that is a massive slippery slope. If you say, acha, Muslims ki jitni abadi hogi, we will give them rights based on that. You're now incentivizing illegal immigration.
Yeah.
You're now incentivizing conversions, right? You're now incentivizing these missionary organizations to come to India and convert as many people as possible to Christianity, because jitni abadi utna haq yaar. The more number of Christians you can create, the more benefits you'll get.
Yeah.
So it's incentivizing all these things that will fundamentally then create a national security situation for India. This is not me saying it. This is Dr. Ambedkar has said it in the past, that Dalits, if they want to convert to Buddhism, do not convert to Christianity or Islam. He said it for a reason, right? So go take it up with Dr. Ambedkar if you have a problem with that statement. It also creates a problem that, okay, so that means you're saying that the micro minorities that exist in India should not basically get any rights, right?
Yeah.
Parsis forget about it. Thakurs forget about it, Brahman forget about it, Sikhs forget about it, right? Those guys can just go to hell, and only the people with like big populations should get, the rights and the benefits, which it is a desperate attempt by political parties to win elections, to get votes. But obviously they never look at the long-term effects of it, which is going to be a level of balkanization of India. You're going to turn India into the Balkans essentially, which is, I feel like, which is going to be the end goal of Jitni Abadi Utna Haq.
I think, look, I'm not saying so-and-so politician has so-and-so connections here or there, but I think it's one of the long-term goals of the West also to balkanize India. I mean, they wanted to do that in 1947. They did it to a certain extent, and they would like to finish the job. And the Chinese would also be very happy for if that were to happen. If India were to, break up into 4 or 5 different distinct chunks. Yeah, so that's the thing. So we have to be very careful about this. We cannot tolerate any of this nonsense, these fissiparous, projects to create further divisions within Indian society. Like you said, it incentivizes conversions, it incentivizes illegal immigration. It will create a certain outlook of society where everybody thinks along very narrow caste lines, that me and my community. So your sub-national identity will supersede your national identity.
Yes.
These are extremely dangerous political tendencies that we need to crack down on. I mean, if you say that I am being anti-democratic by saying this, so be it. The nation comes first and foremost. I mean, democracy has to serve the nation, not the other way around. Yeah, certain things I would not want. They should not exist in democracy, like for trying to create more divisions within society. So yeah, I largely and overall agree with whatever you said about this. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to do a couple of quick rounds with you before I let you go. The first round's called strongly agree or disagree.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you a statement and you have to tell me if you agree, if you strongly agree, or if you disagree with that statement.
Okay.
Statement number one is partition was the best thing to happen to India in 1947
I agree.
at that time.
I agree. Yes.
What is the reason for it?
Considering the scenario in 1947, the kind of politicians we had, and the kind of religious sentiments that had been inflamed, if we had not done partition at the time, we could have had a civil war, which may or may not have been a bad thing, because the situation between India and Pakistan is like a nuclear armed civil war on steroids. But maybe in 1947, what happened was perhaps the right thing, but we should not have let POK happen and all those things. So maybe it was a good thing for the time being. And obviously, even today, we cannot think of reintegrating Pakistan. Even if Pakistan breaks up, those areas, we cannot think of reintegrating them with India. We can't even think of reintegrating Bangladesh as it is today with India. So yeah, it is better that those populations remain distinct for us for the next 50, 100 years until things can go in a certain direction, and then we can think about it. So overall, yeah, it was not, maybe it was not a very bad thing.
Right. Yogi is the right leader to replace Modi.
I agree strongly, yeah.
India must get a seat at the UNSC.
I don't care.
So
Let
do
India
you
rise.
agree? Do you disagree?
I am ambivalent. If we get a seat, great thing. If we don't get a seat, who cares? We have to rise to a certain level where the seat or not becomes irrelevant. We are strong enough to anyway matter.
The out of India theory is more plausible than the Aryan invasion migration theory.
Strongly agree.
The United States is the right long-term strategic ally for India.
Strongly disagree. India has to go it alone.
Why do you say that?
Because the US doesn't have India's best interest in mind. The US sees India as a long-term adversary, as a long-term threat. The same way China became a threat for them, they see India also in the 20-year horizon becoming something like that. Look, the US is a continuation of the British Empire, the British Raj. Okay, the British had the largest empire that ever existed, and the Americans inherited that, and they have taken it to the next level. They created a hyperpower out of it. And their attitudes and everything is exactly the same as that of the British. They see India as these brown unwashed Hindus who are second class humans, and they should not rise too much, and they seek to rule the world forever, and India is a threat for them in the long term. Right now India is not, but eventually India will be, and they will do their best to, like we have discussed, either balkanize India or hurt and harm India in a variety of ways. So the US is the right partner for now, for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Long term, India has to go it alone. We all keep saying India is the oldest civilization, the greatest country that ever existed, and so on. Then if you are that great, you have to do it alone. You cannot, you can have friends and allies and all that, but you cannot have an alliance like an alliance, a de facto alliance, a real alliance. So long term,
Right.
I think India should.
Do you feel like there is a country do you feel like there's a country out there that could be a reliable strategic partner for India the way the EU and the United States are?
See, if Japan can disentangle itself from US occupation, Japan could be one, because we have similar values and similar culture. The Japanese culture is founded on a bedrock of Indian culture going by 1500, 1700 years. And the Southeast Asian nations, even though they are not powerful as such, we are culturally very similar. So there are a number of nations.
Do you think China could ever be that?
Not under the CCP. Well, the culture that is part of the DNA is a very Abrahamic culture. It's Marxism. It's the communism. They talk about socialism with Chinese characteristics. They have a very, capitalistic outlook on economy and all that. But overall, their DNA is very socialist. It's very leftist. So the CCP is not the right fit for India. But in the future, if the CCP falls and a new Chinese empire rises, and if that empire is founded in Confucianism and Buddhism or something like that, then China could be a good fit for India, provided we don't have a common border. As long as we have a common border, they're going to be adversaries. So Tibet needs to be free. That's what I mean.
Right. Okay, last one in this section. India should host the 2036 Olympics. Strongly agree or disagree?
Strongly agree. It's time. Why not?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's a worthwhile endeavor for India?
Look, people were criticizing the G20. G20 से क्या मिलेगा? What is the point of the G20? But at the end of the day, the way it was managed and the way it was carried out, it was pulled off. It was great. It was brilliant for India. It brought the whole country together. It was taken all across the length and the breadth of the country. More than, I don't know, 600 meetings or 200 meetings, whatever it was, in more than 60, 70, 80 locations in India. It was great. It all depends on how you pull it off, how you execute. So the Olympics also, even though it's in one city, you could make the whole country participate in it. And provided India does well, India has been doing progressively better in each Olympics. By this year, 2036, if I'm not mistaken, India could be a genuine sporting power. And if we do, have a great performance on Indian soil, it could be something that totally boosts the morale of the country. So yeah, I think it's a great thing. We should do it.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, last round I want to do with you is a rapid fire round.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you questions, and if you can give me a quick rapid answer for each of those questions. It's question one. During, you do a lot of Q&As on your channel. During your Q&As, what is the silliest, most memorable, or most outrageous question you've ever been asked?
Oh, I used to do this Q&As. We are doing this face-to-face right now on StreamYard, right? So on StreamYard, you can put out a link and you can have anybody join the thing. So sometimes I used to do this Q&As face-to-face. And I've had some very interesting guests. Once I had this Chinese girl who came on and she was asking why are India and China enemies? And people I could see in the live chat, they were commenting she's a Chinese spy and all that. So that was fun. And yeah, you get lots of characters like that. So I don't have any one particular incident, but there are lots of fun moments that I've had as part of the live streams. Yeah.
Anything that sticks out, particularly the Chinese guest that you had?
Yeah, there was kind of a weird lag. I think it was because of the VPN, and
I see.
And looks like there was somebody next to her, right next to her. It looks like that. So I think there was something going on there.
Right. According to you, what is the dumbest political or cultural opinion or narrative that is bandied around in India today?
The dumbest cultural opinion? Political opinion?
Cultural opinion that people might have, political opinion or narrative that people might have that is prevalent in India today.
Oh, one of the dumbest things is obviously that the British did a great favor to India by occupying India for 200 years. And they gave us the judiciary and the English language and the laws and the ports and the railways and all that nonsense. That is
train दे दी अभिजीत. They gave us
train दे दी यार, train दे दी. हमारे पास तो कुछ था ही नहीं. उन्होंने हम क्या कुछ नहीं दिया. That infuriates me.
I don't know how Germany got trains. Yeah, I don't know how Germany got trains. They were never occupied by the British, but somehow they were able to get trains.
And the English advantage. By अंग्रेजी में बात करने से we get advantages that we know the language can offer us. Because the Japanese obviously are a low-tech culture because they don't speak English, so that's why they don't have any technology.
Yeah. The Chinese seem to be really struggling right now.
Oh yeah, totally struggling. The Israelis as well, So
if you had to pick one, what would, according to you, would be the biggest issue facing India today?
Oh, the biggest issue facing India today is mental colonization. I would say we are extremely diffident. Many of us still feel that Indians aren't good enough. That the West is best. Everything Western is better. White skin is better. Or foreign accent is better. This diffidence, this inferiority complex infuriates me, drives me up the walls. I think there are so many problems. You could talk about many problems, but I think this is the one that really infuriates me. I think it's high time we ditch that.
Yeah, I just don't like the way people prostrate. Indians have this weird prostrating thing that they do whenever they see someone. I'm like,
seriously.
Normally भी hello बोल सकते हैं लोगों को.
Yeah, exactly.
फिर जाने की जरूरत नहीं है. What gives you the most amount of hope for India?
The past. We could do it in the past. We'll do it again. See, right now we are going through a phase of this inferiority complex and whatnot, and we are still a third world nation. There are still so many problems. I think if we have the right leadership and we have political stability in 20 to 50 years, we're going to be a totally transformed nation, and the attitudes are going to be very different. We have a history of at least 10,000 years. We have done it all. We have the archaeological evidence to prove that. We had the largest geographical extent of any civilization in antiquity. Egypt plus Mesopotamia put together, and it's still not enough to cover the Saraswati Sindhu region and the kind of advancements we had, the science, the technology, the engineering, the mathematics, whatnot. We have done it all in the past. We have it in our blood, in our DNA. So that is what gives me enormous amounts of confidence that we're going to do it again in the future. It's just a passing phase. 1,000 years is not a very big deal for us. It's like a weekend. So yeah, we're going to get back.
You're someone who's knowledgeable about a lot of topics, so I wanted to ask you, Do you have a favorite genre that you like to read up on the most?
Oh, I read a lot of stuff. These days, I'm more into current affairs and news and all that. But yeah, uh, like to get an understanding of geopolitics, you really have to read up on history. So you can do that only if you really are interested. So world history is something I've always read a lot of. I've obviously read a lot of science. I mean, hard science is one thing I read, but as a kid, I used to read a lot of science fiction. Science fiction is something I really enjoy. These days, science fiction has become very dystopian. So I like to read the 1950s, 1960s science fiction, which was very different, very quirky, very unique. So I'm a voracious reader. I read all kinds of stuff. But if you wanted me to give a couple of genres, I would say history is very interesting. Science fiction is great if I want to read fiction. Sometimes you want to just turn your mind off and read something absurd, and you read science fiction or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the kind of stuff I enjoy reading.
Yeah, science fiction is good. I enjoy that too. What is the favorite thing that you've read in the last year?
Oh, the favorite thing I've read. I've read a lot of non-fiction. I've read a lot of news and stuff. I've read lots of articles. Nothing stands out to me as such. Like this was my favorite thing of the past year.
Any particular book or any particular piece of media that really stood out to you?
I read a lot of stuff. What can I think of? I read The Chip War, one of those books. I've been reading up about.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah, The Chip War is a reasonably good book. What else? Can't really think of anything else that sticks out or stands out for me.
Since you're a fan of history, if I had to ask you that, okay, this real historical person is going to have a biopic made about them, what historical person would you choose?
Genghis Khan.
Yeah?
Oh, absolutely. I don't want a biopic. I want a seven season series about him. like the
Why Genghis Khan particularly?
why Genghis Khan? The guy conquered half the known world in the 13th, 14th century. The kind of exploits that he had are unimaginable. He conquered more land in 20 years than Roman emperors conquered in 2.5 centuries. I mean, if you put it in perspective, the guy was incredible. Alexander can't hold a candle to Genghis Khan. I mean, the kind of portrayal you see of Genghis Khan in history is that he was like a bloodthirsty barbarian. He massacred millions and millions of people. If you look at the real facts, it's a way more complex than that. First of all, he never went to war unless he had a just cause for war. He always fought in retaliation, but when he fought, he took it to the next level. And the kind of technological innovations, the kind of military innovations he did, we attribute the blitzkrieg strategy to the Germans. Well, it was Genghis Khan who was doing it 800 years ago. So, and the kind of life story he had, the kind of struggles he went through. I mean, creating a nation out of a bunch of ragtag tribes and then conquering half the world with it is unheard of. I mean, think of a nation like Bhutan. A nation like Bhutan goes and conquers the whole world. That sort of thing, So it's an extraordinary story, and it's a very interesting story, a very complex story. It's not something you could put on screen and do justice to it in a 2 hour or 3 hour biopic. You would need at least one season, or I would say longer. So yeah, and the reason why they don't make anything about him is because he's not a white guy. He's an Asiatic. And he defeated the whites. He defeated the Europeans. I mean, he was knocking on the doors of the Holy Roman Empire before he died. And his descendants did way more than that. So there's a kind of jealousy, and that sort of thing. So that's why nobody has done this. But they are very interested in finding his grave,
Oh, wow. Do they not know where it is?
No one knows where it is. They're never going to find it. Never going to find it.
If you could pick an Indian, a real Indian person from history that you wish existed today and had influence over India today, who would it be?
Lord Krishna.
Yeah?
The man himself, Parthasarathi, the great Sutradhar of the entire Mahabharata era. Either him or Vishnugupta Chanakya, one of these two.
I was gonna say Chanakya too.
Well, Krishna was the Chanakya of all Chanakyas, wasn't he?
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's a fair one. Are you somebody who consumes media like movies, TV shows?
Oh, I love movies. I love TV shows, but I don't have the time to do much of that these days. But yeah, I love movies. If you gave
What
me
is your favorite current movie?
I'm looking forward to Napoleon. I'm hoping it's not going to be all woked up and messed up. So Napoleon, Joaquin Phoenix, that's something I'm looking forward to. I watched Oppenheimer recently. It wasn't a bad movie, but it wasn't as great as it was hyped out to be. Not a bad movie at all overall. Yeah, I like. Once again, I'm delving into history here. I also like interstellar style science fiction. So I have these genres that I like watching. Look, I love watching movies. I don't mind watching 2 movies on the big screen every week if there are good movies. But these days there are no good movies. Yeah, so that
Yeah, that's true. Do you have a guilty pleasure movie or TV or book that you are slightly embarrassed to admit that you like?
no, I'm not embarrassed. One book I have
Okay.
read like 7, 8 times. I haven't touched it in the past 15 years, but I've read it 7, 8 times. Is The Lord of the Rings. I was like obsessed with it when I
Oh,
was in
yeah.
my 20s or something. So that's something I used to read a
Yeah.
lot. I've seen The Mask, Jim Carrey's Mask, like 20, 30 times.
Oh, yeah, it's a great movie.
It's a good
Yeah.
movie. You're kind of feeling low a little bit. You go and watch The Mask, you'll be happy. Yeah, I mean, I watch all kinds of. I like comedy as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's no such thing that embarrasses me as such.
Sure. Is there a movie that everyone really, really loves, but you don't really like?
Oh, there are so many of those. I can't think of any specific name right now.
Is there any movie that everybody's like, "Arey yaar, ye movie jaake dekh," and you saw it and you're like, eh.
I would have to go 20, 30 years for that. क्या हम आपके हैं कौन or something like that.
Oh my God.
My God, what a
The movie's
painful
like,
watch. Ooh.
yeah, a cringe a second.
Oh yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah, so yeah.
Okay, two questions. What will be the name of the movie made about your life?
No idea. I've never given it any thought at all, so I can't imagine what it would be.
Who will play you in that movie?
I guess a future actor. I would have said Ray Liotta, but he's dead. So
Oh, really? That's a good choice. Yeah. I like that guy. He's such a good actor. He doesn't get enough credit.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's a good actor. Do you remember that movie of his where he's dropped into some weird planet and he has to fight as like a gladiator on this weird planet?
I think
You
it was
remember
called
that movie?
Enemy Mine, was it?
No. It's not Enemy Mine. I remember Enemy Mine, but it's not that. It's
Was it
this
him?
weird movie. I don't know if it was Ray Liotta in Enemy Mine, but Ray Liotta, he's in this like weird planet.
Okay.
Gladiator movie. I don't know what it's called.
Sci-fi movie.
Yeah, it's like a weird sci-fi movie in which he gets dropped off into this like weird planet, and he becomes like a gladiator and becomes like a savior for that planet. Really underrated movie. He's really
how
good
long
in that
ago was it
movie.
about? How long ago?
I think it's from the 90s, from the late 90s. that
Okay,
movie.
okay.
Yeah.
I can't think of
Yeah,
it
look
right
that up. If you like Ray Liotta, you'll like that movie.
now. Okay.
Favorite genre of music?
Oh, once again, I consume all kinds of music, eclectic music. I don't like today's music at all. I can't stand it. I can't stand hip hop and rap and all that stuff. I just can't stand it. But I like blues. I like jazz. I like rock and roll. I like the 60s, 70s,
Right.
80s. I like music from Somalia. I like music from Mali in Western Africa. I like Japanese
Oh,
music.
wow.
I like music from Mongolia, throat singing, humi. I have a very eclectic taste in music. Something interesting, I'm gonna listen to it. I'm gonna try to replicate it on the guitar. But yeah, that's the sort of thing.
Do you have a go-to music genre that you listen to?
I don't as such have a go-to. It depends on the mood and the occasion. Sometimes I will listen to Indian ragas, like evening ragas or morning ragas. I kind of prefer morning ragas. They're more positive and happy. Typically, I mean, if you were to ask me for a go-to genre, it may be rock music. Led Zeppelin sort of
Okay.
stuff. Yeah, that's all right.
So classic rock.
Classic rock, yeah, not new age rock or whatever it is these days. I don't mind
Yeah,
indie music as well.
I grew up listening to a lot of grunge and new metal. So like I'm
Nirvana
a
and
big
stuff.
fan of grunge, like in early 90s grunge and like new metal.
Okay, right. Yeah, Nirvana was good. I remember that. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. For you, what is India's best town or maybe your favorite town in India?
India's best town, from my perspective, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of partial towards Leh in Ladakh. Nice place.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's a good choice. Yeah, it's a good choice. I've never been to Leh. I'd love to
nice
go
place.
sometime. Yeah. What state in India has the best food according to you?
What state in India has the best food?
Yeah.
Once again, I am a big foodie. I like food from everywhere. I like food from Assam, from Manipur, from southern India, from western India. Punjabi food also I like. Gujarati food, Marwari food. I can't answer you. I like all food. I like food from all states, from all towns, all cities. Kolhapuri food from
Right.
Maharashtra. I love it.
Right. Yeah, I feel like UP is an interesting case because UP is a big confluence
Oh yeah.
area because it has influences from basically all over India.
Yep. It
I
does.
feel
Yeah.
like if you want to get a taste of kind of all over India ka taste agar lagna hai, to I think Lucknow or something like that could be a good choice.
Right.
And final question, a funny or interesting fact about you that people might not know.
Funny or interesting fact? What's funny about me? I'm not sure. Funny fact about me.
It could be an interesting fact too.
Interesting fact. I'm kind of an open book. I don't have any funny secrets or interesting secrets. Uh, I don't know. Can't
Like,
think of
I'll
anything.
give you mine, for example.
Okay.
For me, one time I went to a KFC. It was a KFC in Connaught Place in Delhi. I went there and I ordered some food. And like 20 minutes later, the manager approached me and asked, "Sir, have you eaten all of this by yourself?" I said, "Yes, sir, I have."
Uh-huh.
And they said, "Sir, this is the most food anybody has ordered ever in a single sitting
I
in
see.
this KFC,
I
as
see.
far as I've been here."
Okay, let's go one funny fact. There is a certain chili, a pepper called the Raja chili, the Bhut Jolokia, and it's supposed to be
Achha.
the spiciest chili in the world. I can eat a whole of that in a meal. One whole of that.
Really?
Oh yeah, I can.
Ah.
Well, that's an interesting fact.
Is it supposed to be spicier than what they call ghost pepper?
It's the same thing. It's that.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's what it is. Yeah. So I can eat that one
there
pepper
you
in
go.
one meal.
We might have to do a little chili eating contest sometime then.
Oh yeah, let's do
on
that.
the show. We'll get you back and we'll do a chili eating contest.
All right.
Thank you, Abhijit, for doing this. I apologize. I got a little bit delayed. I had to keep you waiting a little bit,
Okay.
but I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate you talking to me. Hopefully, it wasn't a complete slog for you.
Not at all. Good fun. Lovely conversation. Thank you.
Okay. No, I'm glad. Thanks again for joining. Thank you for your insight, guys. Where can people that are listening to this channel who, for some reason, haven't heard of you or don't follow you, where can they follow you?
Oh yeah, they can follow me on my YouTube channel or on Twitter, both by my name, so not hard to find.
So Abhijit Chavda on Twitter and Abhijit Chavda on YouTube.
Yep, that's right.
Guys, please go follow Abhijit there. Very interesting content, very varied content, which is something that I really enjoy about his channel. Like it's a lot of different topics. It's a lot of different sort of genres as well. Almost it's genre bending content, and I highly enjoy it. I'd recommend people listen to it. Thanks again, Abhijit. Just stick around with me offline for a second while the recording finishes. And guys, if you like today's show, please like, share, subscribe. All of that fun stuff. It's going to be available as a podcast episode later on as well. That'll be available in the description of the show. We will see you for the next episode. Tab tak ke liye, tata bye bye. And we'll see you next time.